So just to let everyone know, we will be recording the meeting tonight. So if you would prefer to not be part of the recording, you are welcome to turn your camera off. I'll go through this in our opening though. So just wanted to let everyone know before I hit record. Okay. And it is 7 o'clock on the dot. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. Welcome to the 44th Annual General Meeting for LAMP Community Health Center. We're so glad you could join us tonight. My name is Kiron Diaz and I'm the Executive Director of LAMP. Before we get started, I'd like to just run through a few technical considerations. We have quite a few people joining us today at this meeting, so we've muted participant lines to reduce noise disruptions. The chat function will be available for attendees to communicate with our chat monitor, Shannon. You can use the chat function to ask questions and to move or second motions presented. We will be using polls today to cast votes in response to the motions. If you lose connection, please log back on by clicking on the Zoom link sent to you. You'll be readmitted into the meeting right away. If you're on the phone, you won't be able to see any visuals or vote on motions, but you will hear our annual general meeting proceedings. We will also be live streaming this meeting on YouTube to allow our community members to see the proceedings. They will join the Zoom meeting after the business portion to participate in the panel discussion that will follow. Should we happen to experience any serious issues with the security of our meeting, we will end the session and send a new link to members in order to complete the AGM. Tonight, we will be using polls to vote on the motions presented. We will ask members to move or second a motion by typing "I move" or "I second," along with their full name in the chat box. If your name doesn't happen to be your full name already, please add that on to it. If your name is as represented, then you don't need to put your name. So we can go from there with the naming piece. When prompted, all members please vote. A poll will pop up on your screen and you can choose your response. You will be able to select in favor, oppose, or abstain. We will share the poll results on the screen and we will know immediately if a motion has passed or not. Don't worry about remembering all of this. There'll be reminders along the way with each motion. Please also note that the AGM is being recorded and live streamed. If you don't want to be recorded, you have the option of turning your camera off. Consent to being recorded will be implied if you do not turn your camera off. Lastly, this is our second virtual AGM. So I'd like to say that we're seasoned because we did one last year, but the fact is technology can be temperamental sometimes. And so while we certainly have planned for it to run smoothly, we ask for your patience should there be any unforeseen hiccups along the way as we learn to work with technology in new ways. So appreciate your consideration in that regard. Brenda, can I ask you to confirm that we have quorum? Our bylaws state that we need at least 20 members present to meet the quorum for general meetings. I can report, sorry, Brenda, are you there? Raise of the Huron-Wendat Credit River First Nations. Ontario is covered by 46 treaties and agreements and is home to many Indigenous nations from across Turtle Island, including the Inuit and the Métis. These treaties and other agreements, including the One Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, are agreements to peaceably share and care for the land and its resources. Other Indigenous nations, Europeans, and newcomers were invited into this covenant in the spirit of respect, peace, and friendship, and a responsibility to care for this land and each other. We are mindful of broken covenants, the oppression experienced by the community, and many lives lost due to systemic violence, and we strive to be accountable to make this right. We are all treaty people. We have come here as settlers, immigrants, newcomers in this generation and of generations past. I would also like to acknowledge those of us who came here forcibly, particularly as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. Therefore, we honor and pay tribute to the ancestors of African origin and descent. And personally, I'd like to just add that as an immigrant and a settler on this land, I am honored and pay tribute to this land and thank our Indigenous community members and ancestors for the care taking of this land, and feel very privileged this evening to be here with you and to share in all of that. So welcome, and thank you for joining us. I'm going to turn now to introducing Camila Lozado, who's a third-year student at Humber College's Bachelor of Music program. Camila is going to sing O Canada for us this evening. And if you just bear with me for a moment so we can unmute Camila and have her get started. Here we go, Camila.
Oh, good. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patron love, and all of Passcode land. With glowing hearts, we see dear eyes, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you very much, Camila. Thank you for sharing that with us, Camila. I would like now to introduce you to Ashley Dix, Chair of the LAMP Board for the past 2 years and a member of the board for the last 6 years. And bear with me while we unmute Ashley. All yours, Ashley.
Thank you, Cadone. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to LAMP's 44th Annual General Meeting. It's been my pleasure to serve as the board chair over the past 2 years. And although this virtual meeting is quite different from what we're used to, I'm so pleased that you could join us this evening. We will get things started with the approval of the agenda for tonight's proceedings. So the agenda is on the screen in front of you. Basically, we'll have approval of the agenda, approval of the minutes from our 2020 AGM, approval of our audited financial statements, approval of the auditor for next year, election of board of director members and approval of that, approval of some changes that we've made to the bylaws, and following that, there'll be and we will finish the evening with a panel discussion. So can I have a motion now to approve this agenda? Once again, just a reminder, anyone can move or any member of LAMP can move or second a motion. To do so, you need to type in the words, I move for moving the motion, or I second, to second the motion, in the chat box, along with the full name if it doesn't match your screen name. So can we get somebody to move this motion, please?
Motion moved by Ken Yap.
Thank you, Ken. Do we have somebody to second this motion?
If Karen Smith has seconded the motion.
Great news. Okay, thank you, Karen. So thank you now. So we will go to the first poll for formal approval of this motion. So all members, you can now vote using the poll on the screen that just popped up, and you can choose your response. You'll be able to select in favor, oppose, or abstain. Okay.
This motion has passed.
Okay, thank you so much, everybody. Okay, next item we have to on the agenda is to approve the annual general meeting minutes from last year, 2020. These were sent to all members by email in advance of the meeting. Are there any questions, comments, or corrections? If there are any questions, comments, corrections, just type them in the chat box and Shannon will read them off to us. Give it a little minute. Okay, Shannon, any questions?
There are no questions.
There are no questions? Okay, thank you. So can we get a motion to approve the minutes from the 2020 annual general meeting?
Moved by, sorry, go ahead.
Moved by Louis Charles Leverly.
Thank you, Louis Charles. And can we get someone to second this?
Seconded by Rania Shugi.
Okay, thank you, Rania. Appreciate that. We need to get the theme from Jeopardy going in between these, so while we're waiting. Okay, next we'll move on to the poll. So please vote using the poll that should show up in your screen shortly. Once again, in favor, oppose, or abstain. And this makes it easy.
Okay. This motion has passed.
It has, in favor. Thank you so much, everybody. Oh, back to you, Kadon.
Thank you, Ashley. Our next agenda item is the election of board members. But before we do that, I would like to recognize 4 of our board members who will be leaving us this year. Ashley Dix has served 3 consecutive terms on our board, totaling 6 years, and has served in many roles, including board chair. Chris Bisco served on the board for 6 years and has served in many roles, including chair of the governance committee. Charles Musa has also been with us for 6 years and was a volunteer of LAMP for many years before that. Ezra Mabira has given us 3 years and has held the position of board secretary. We want to thank them for their time, dedication, and commitment to supporting LAMP's work to serve our communities. Their service as directors has been invaluable and we will miss them. We will move now into board nomination and election and the election component of the AGM. I'd like to introduce you to Arwin Hunter, a representative of our governance committee. And Arwin, let's get you unmuted as well. Welcome, Arwin, over to you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Arwin Hunter. I am a director of the board and a part of the governance committee. The Governance Committee is responsible for the succession of the board members. We recruit and interview candidates to fill the board's vacancies. Being a director requires a strong commitment to the mission, vision, and beliefs and principles of LAMP and the gift of time. This year, we had many community members apply to become directors of the board to share their skills and experiences. We had a really difficult time choosing our 5 nominees to fill our vacancies. We would like to thank everyone who applied. Let me present the new nominees to fill the vacancies on the board. Our new nominees are Juliette Allen, Alicia Big Canoe, Nicholas Goldhawk, Jana Wiggle, and Andre Tron. 4 board members have completed their terms on the board and have chosen to run again for another 2-year term. Michael Ann George, Inga Mazurik, Rania Shuggy, Karen Ann Smith. May I have a motion to approve new nominees Juliette Allen, Alicia Big Canoe, Nicholas Goldhawk, Jana Wiggle, and Andre Tron, and returning board members Michael Ann George, Inga Mazurik, Rania Shuggy, and Karen Ann Smith to a 2-year term on the LAMP board.
Moved by Rania Shuggy.
May I have a seconder?
Seconded by Ashley Dix.
All members, please vote using the poll on your screen, and you can choose your response. You will be able to select in favor, oppose, or abstain.
And we'll give just a few more seconds for folks to respond. This motion has passed.
Yay. Welcome to the board. I would now like to introduce you to Ken Yap. Ken has been a member of our board for 3 years and has been the treasurer for the past 2 years.
Bear with us as we unmute Ken. All yours, Ken.
Thank you, Kadun. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I want to introduce Lan Jun Wang, CPA, CA, MBA of Hilborn LLP. Hilborn LLP conducted our audit, and Lan Jun will be presenting some highlights from the audited financial statements for the year ending March 31st of 2021. Members received the financial report in the AGM package. Lan Jun, please go ahead.
Just a moment, we're trying to get to Lan Jun. Okay, bear with us for a moment. Okay, we may be having some tech difficulties there. I don't see Lan Jun in the meeting. Lan Jun, if you're signed in under a different name, we may not be able to figure out which one you are. So if you are, you can just select your name and more. She signed in under Brenda. Okay. All right, let's see if we can get Lan Jun on here.
Hello,
There
can you hear me
are.
now? Yeah,
Yes.
for some reason, I was assigned the name of Brenda. I don't know how to change it. And I sent a message to the host
Okay.
and I haven't get a response. I'm okay with the name of Brenda. Good
Okay,
evening,
well,
everyone.
welcome, Lan Jun.
So good evening, everyone. First, I would like to say thank you for inviting Hilborn to attend the AGM. And I'm glad to have this opportunity to meet you and to report to you our audit findings. So we conducted the audit in May. It is the second year that we worked remotely. Thanks for the full assistance by the management. We were able to complete the audit on time and issue the reports as scheduled. I would like to take this opportunity to express our appreciation to the management and the board. Without your full support, we would not be able to make it happen. So although our audit was conducted off the site and we didn't cut down our audit procedures, as usual, we tested the revenue, payroll, and other expenses for significant accounts. And we also performed unpredictability testing to ensure that the financial information reported by the management is existent, complete, accurate, and reasonable. And the financial resources provided by the funders were used for the purpose they pertain to. Based on the evidence we obtained, we concluded that the financial statements prepared by the management are fairly stated in accordance with the Canadian accounting standards for not-for-profit organizations. Same as the prior year, our audit opinion was qualified due to the fact that LAMP derives revenue from the fundraising activities and donations, which is not susceptible for completeness testing. And this is common with many similar organizations. So we don't really view this as any deficiency. It's a common audit report. For the financial performance of LAMP during 2021 fiscal year, I would like to highlight that LAMP recorded 14.5 million of gross revenue and ended with a small surplus of 375,000, mainly from the unrealized gain on the investment of 357,000. So for the restricted funds received from Land and the Ministry of Health, LAMP spent the money in accordance with the budget and recorded a small surplus repayable to the funder. So overall, LAMP managed to spend almost all the resources available to the benefits of the community during fiscal 2021. It's another year of success. Congratulations. Thanks. This is my presentation. Any questions?
Thank you, Lanjun. Are there any questions concerning the financial statements? Would you please use the chat room if you have a question? And Shannon, can you please let us know if there is any?
There are no questions.
Thank you very much, Lanjun. And thank you, Shannon. Given that there are no further questions, may I have a motion to approve the audited financial statements for the fiscal year ending March 31st of 2021 and the report from the auditors?
Moved by Chris Bisco.
Thank you. May I have a seconder?
Seconded by Megan Primo.
Thank you. All members, please vote using the poll on your screen and you can choose your response. You will be able to select in favor, oppose, or abstain.
Okay, this motion has passed.
Thank you. Our next item of business is the appointment of an auditor for the current year and fix their remuneration. May I have a motion to appoint an auditing firm and fix their remuneration for the fiscal year ending March 31st of 2022?
Moved by Rania Shugi,
Thank you. And a seconder?
seconded by Karen Smith.
Thank you. And all members, please vote using the poll on your screen and you can choose your response. You will be able to select in favor, oppose, or abstain.
Okay, just a few more seconds. This motion has passed.
Thank you. And back to you, Kadong.
Thank you. Just a moment here, I'm going between screens. Okay. Thank you, Ken. This year, we took on the challenge of reviewing and updating the LAMP bylaws. The governance committee spent many months doing a comprehensive review. The committee presented recommendations for changes to the board of directors. The board reviewed and approved these changes on July 22nd, 2021, and now these changes are being put in front of our membership for final approval. The changes were listed and the rationale summarized and sent out to all members in your packages. I'd like to introduce you to Chris Bisco, Chair of our Governance Committee, to present the bylaws. And just a moment. All over to you, Chris.
Great, thank you, Kadon, and good evening, everyone. The LAMP bylaws are reviewed regularly. However, over the last few years, the membership has not made changes, particularly haven't made changes since 2008. Most of the changes being put forward today update the bylaws to reflect a few things. One, technology changes that will enable the membership and board to function digitally, to clarify some language and update the terms, and finally, to update some timeline changes to better meet the needs of our membership. We're going to present a few slides, and over the next few slides, we'll highlight some of those changes. If you have any questions or need clarification, please use the chat box and we will do our best to answer them. At the end of the review, if there are no objections or changes, we will ask for a motion to approve all the changes as presented. On the slide that you see on your screen, we have a number of different changes, and we'll just go through them and talk about some of those highlights. The first one is in relation to Section 7 or Article 7 of the bylaw, and that is there and put forward to clarify the membership eligibility, which particularly was identified for full-time or part-time, and we included some of the language for contract to be able to support that. There are a few other changes, which on this slide start off with Section 8, which deals with members and the meeting of the members. In the case of this one with COVID, times needed to include some consideration for virtual meetings. We added some language to clarify that the annual general meeting of the members can be held electronically or digitally. And on the next slide, we have included a number of updates still within that section. Some of them are fairly light in relation to the first one being numbering changes to accommodate the new article, including a notification to the auditor as part of a process that we have. And then within that, just extending a time frame for notice to our membership from 10 days to 50 days for a little bit more advanced notice for that item. When we take a look at the next section at the bottom of the slide, we have Section 9, which flows over the next slide to a few other ones. Section 9 or Article 9 deals specifically with the board of directors. So in this one, we made language a little bit more clearer to be able to support that section. If we take a look at the next slide, we have another change. This was really to give adequate time to replace board members from 3 months to 6 months. So that there can be some time for recruiting and identification of members. The next one, we clarified the procedure for replacing board members if it was required to allow some flexibility for that. And the last two take a look at just really covering the Article 9.1, so that was included within the language of that. And then the last one, just to do some changing. On the next slide, we have a couple of more that relate to section 9, which you can see is our biggest section. This one at the top of the slide is there to clarify the meetings of board members that, again, they can be held digitally, as we saw a need for that in the COVID times that we had. The next two just really are light ones. There's about 7 items. There's 1 on this slide, there's 6 on the other ones, and they're just really in relation to some name changes, adding in names of committees or adding in particular names and terms as needed. So we'll just flip through that one so you have a chance to take a look at that. And then we'll move on to, yep, great, we've got that slide there. And then as we get to the end of it, we have at the bottom, we have Article 12, which really deals with the executive committee. And with that, again, as you can see, there are some light changes. Section 13, we just really updated some of the standing committee names and made some spelling corrections. And that closes off the proposed bylaw changes. So just checking in to see if there were any questions for clarification.
I see no questions.
Okay, with no further questions, we have a motion. Could we have a motion to approve the proposed changes to the Lakeshore Area Multi-Service Project bylaws?
Barry Andrews has passed the motion.
Okay, great. May I have a seconder?
Megan Primo has seconded the motion.
Great. And as with the others, there'll be a poll coming up shortly. You can place your vote in favor, oppose, or abstain. And we'll wait for the results.
Okay. This motion has passed.
Excellent. Thank you all for making this process go so smoothly. The updated bylaws will be available on the webpage shortly.
Great. Thank you, Chris. This concludes the business meeting portion of our AGM. I'd like to thank Ashley, Arwin, Ken, and Chris for your help this evening. I would also like to thank Lanjun for joining us this evening. And most of all, I'd like to thank our members for being here with us and for your participation in voting. I'd also like to thank community members who are watching and our staff team watching on our YouTube live stream. This is the first time we've done a YouTube live stream, so I hope it was successful and people were able to, feel like they were in the room with us. Thank you for joining us. The second portion of our AGM will begin shortly, so just bear with us for a moment. We'll be switching gears and inviting community members who are watching on the YouTube live stream. If you would like to join the panel discussion on the Zoom meeting, you are welcome to log in, and the login information will be shared with you on the YouTube channel. But before we get started, we have just a little montage that was created for your viewing pleasure as we transition from the business meeting portion to our panel discussion. Our staff have done a phenomenal job this year supporting the community, and these are just a few highlights from the year that has passed. Of course, we weren't always in, the mode of taking photographs, so there aren't many pictures, but we did get some in this year. Our focus has been on supporting the community and making sure that everyone stays safe. So I'm glad though that we were able to pull these examples of the work that's been done together, and happy to share them with you and share the highlights of our work. We are going to take just a brief intermission, about 10 minutes. We'll start our panel discussion, and we'll be joined by some community health champions and experts in their respective areas. Will be speaking with us about the recovery, building back better, dare I say, post-pandemic. So please stay with us, and we will start again shortly in about 10 minutes. Okay, enjoy the montage. Welcome back, everyone. And if you'll bear with us for a moment as we get started again. Okay. Okay, and so we're working with technology here this evening, folks. So we're going to, I'll do my best. I am no tech wizard, but I try to be. So we will get things moving and hope that we don't run into any tech issues. And Shannon, I had to reclaim host privileges for a moment because I'll need to unmute our panelists. So we will get started in just a minute. Okay, so welcome everyone, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules. I know there are lots of things you could be doing this evening. My name is Caron Diaz, and for those of you just joining us, I have the privilege of leading the LAMP Community Health Center team at the Lakeshore and East Mississauga locations as Executive Director. I hope you enjoyed our year in review video, those of you who were able to see it. Some highlights of our work during the year and this past summer. So thank you. We just wrapped up our business portion of the meeting with LAMP members. And so our business portion is held with registered LAMP members. And I know what many of you are wondering, how do I become a registered LAMP member? So it is a very easy process. Becoming a LAMP member means that you are completing one of our membership forms, either online or in person, and paying your yearly dues. The fee is a whopping $3 per year, and we encourage community members to sign up for a 3-year membership that is $9. It saves on administrative costs and your time of redoing a membership each year. By supporting LAMP, you contribute to the well-being of our great community, and you help to show our funders that LAMP services are vital to the community. Our funders do look at the number of members we have, and so because it is an indication of how engaged our community members are. So if you do not have a LAMP membership, please do sign up for one. It's very easy. And if you drop by or give us a call, we'll tell you how and support you through that process. Anyone who lives, works, or volunteers in our catchment area or who is serving as a director is eligible to become a LAMP member. And LAMP is working to improve community wellness and quality of life for everyone in our community. And your participation in that is a great part of our success. A healthy community and a happy community is an advantage to all community members. So for more information, please contact us. You can reach out to Jasmine Du, and she'd be happy to help you become a member of LAMP. Okay. So I am going to attempt now to pin our panelists. So if you bear with me for just a moment, we will try to get everyone set up here. Okay, good evening, Dr. Kenty. Good to have you with us. And I will be introducing our guests in just a moment as I get them set up. Welcome, Dina. Nice to see you. Thank you for joining us. And we've just got a few. Hi, Kate. Welcome. And we have Salome we're going to add here. Just a moment. Hi there, Salome. Thanks for joining us. And Talia Bronstein rounds out the group. Thank you all. And I am impressed that I was able to get that all done without, without having a tech difficulty. Thank you for joining us this evening. And someone out there, I see that someone is giving me a clap for doing that. I appreciate it. I'll take it. Thanks so much. Okay, so we're pleased that you could all join us tonight. Each year at our AGM, we try to really bring forward a different issue that may be topical in the community and impacting community members. This year, the COVID-19 pandemic has been a significant one that's impacted all our lives. It has also exposed inequities that have been amplified throughout the pandemic. With the federal election so close at hand, tonight we will hear from a stellar panel of frontline experts on some of the key issues and challenges ahead. Building back better on the heels of a recovery, no small task. I'd like to introduce our panel to you this evening. We're fortunate to have them with us for LAMP's 44th Annual General Meeting. Dina Ladd is the Executive Director of the Toronto Workers Action Center. Salome Amadi is a professor and lead researcher for Humber College's partnership with LAMP on a research project on affordable housing needs in South Etobicoke. Kate O'Neill is a spokesperson for the Lakeshore Affordable Housing Advocacy and Action Group. Talia Bronstein is the Vice President of Research and Advocacy at the Daily Bread Food Bank. And rounding out our group, Dr. Akwatu Kenti is heading up several tables during our COVID planning and response, including the Black Scientists table at the City of Toronto. And all of our panelists are going to introduce themselves when they get started briefly. Dr. Kenti is also a professor at the Dalalana School of Public Health, a researcher, and formerly an assistant deputy minister with the provincial government on the equity file. And also, Akwatu, I can't remember your last accolade here. And yes, so I think that was it. Yes, Deputy Minister, I'll stop there and you can introduce yourselves a little bit later when you get to speaking. I'd like to welcome you all to LAMP and thank you for contributing your time this evening and sharing your insights with us on some really important issues that are impacting our communities. The federal election is coming up, and here's an opportunity for us to have some of the discussions that we hope our leaders are hearing. And this is an opportunity to share some information that will support our community in this recovery. And hopefully we can share that and see some of the needs of our community be met as we exit the election period and go into governance. We don't want to just have these issues come up during a time of election. We do want to see them take form in how our leaders govern. With that in mind, let's talk about jobs and fair wages and what needs to happen to improve the economy and our ability to do the necessities like pay rent and feed our families. Dina has been working to improve wages and working conditions in different sectors dominated with low wages, violations of rights, and precarious work for the past 29 years. She's active in the Migrant Workers Alliance for Change, Justice for Workers, which was previously known as the 15 in Fairness campaign, and is one of the founding executive directors of the Toronto Workers Action Center. The Workers Action Center organizes to improve wages and working conditions for workers, women and immigrant workers in precarious jobs that face discrimination, violations of rights, and those sectors that are devoid of benefits in the workplace and such. So Dina, I'd like to welcome you and ask you to go ahead and share with us your thoughts as we think about building back better in terms of employment and job security. Okay. Just a moment.
Can you hear me
There we
now?
are. Yes.
Excellent, excellent. Doing great on technology. Um,
Thank you.
yeah. So anyways, thank you so much for inviting me to join this important conversation. And obviously, we're all kind of paying attention to what's happening with the federal election. And so I just want to start from basically saying, you know, let's be clear, the pandemic is definitely not over. I think we're all dealing with the uncertainty around the Delta variant, our children under the age of 12 not being vaccinated, schools reopening, this sort of introduction of the vaccine certification, how it's going to be implemented, many workers not wanting to go back to the terrible working conditions and poverty wages that were there during the pandemic and pre-pandemic. And you know, many sectors are not even open yet, and many sectors are at really incredibly low capacity in terms of hours of work. So many workers are just getting maybe 15 hours of work a week. So they are definitely not making enough to survive on. So I just want to acknowledge and sort of put on the table this incredible stress and pressure that it's putting on all of us right now, whether we're parents, whether we've been laid off, whether we've been working on the front lines during this pandemic. And for many of us who were not even able to access any emergency critical benefits, it's been a really rough time. And so I want to touch on, I think, 5 sort of areas very quickly that are critical around the federal elections. And I'm going to just kind of get right into it. So the first one is emergency benefits. So emergency benefits, income benefits have been absolutely critical at keeping us all afloat. And together, many of us have collectively pushed to ensure that those benefits, such as the Canada Emergency Response Benefits, all the benefits on caregiving and sickness, had a base rate of at least $500 per week. And so the creation of this was excellent because many people would not have been able to access employment insurance because they were misclassified as independent contractors, they're working for cash, they were self-employed. And I think it was incredibly significant that we were able to open up the access points to a huge segment of the labor market who don't actually have access to these regular types of benefits. I think it's important to mention that international students, which are hundreds and thousands of them in Canada, were not allowed to get access to these benefits. The threshold of hours that they could work increased, which made that, made it possible that those international students were in very dangerous and unsafe working conditions. And we've really seen the impact of that with a significant number of suicides in the last 6 months of international students and people dying on the job. And also being targeted by racists, such as the international student in Nova Scotia, who was recently targeted and murdered. And so this sets up very brutal issues that we have to kind of deal with as a society. And also migrant workers without a valid social insurance number were also not allowed to access any of these emergency benefits. So right now, 2 months ago, the government cut this recovery benefit by 40%. That means that workers now have less. They are now not receiving $800. So that means that they're only getting $1,200 a month to survive on, to pay rent and the bills. Even though CERB has been extended by 4 weeks, as you can imagine, when you're not allowed, when you can't survive on $1,200, it means that you are going to be pushed into, again, precarious and dangerous and low wage work. So where are we at right now? So just before calling an election, the federal government announced the application period for all recovery benefits were extended until October 23rd. The recovery caregiving benefit, the sickness benefit are still, $500 a week. But the CRB has been cut and they haven't reversed this cut. And we know that people are going to need these benefits beyond October 23rd. So the pandemic isn't over, and I urge you to join us to pressure the government to reverse this terrible cut. Second issue, employment insurance. So while the CRB was being created, the employment insurance system also then ended up delivering $500 a week. Again, very critical, because workers who only would get 55% of what they make in the labor market, where precarious employment is so dominant, would not have been able to survive. So establishing this floor was critical, because EI becomes irrelevant and inaccessible if you are not, if you can't have enough money to survive on. So the lowering of hours was very, very important for especially racialized workers, immigrant workers, women who were in precarious employment. And this was huge. However, these changes are also temporary. So what do we do about this? Well, in early August, the federal government began consultations on how changes to employment insurance could be made more permanent and better. This has all been put on hold during the federal elections, but the elections are a fabulous opportunity for us to ask the person knocking on our door wanting our vote about making permanent improvements to EI. So how do we make sure that all workers have access to EI, including gig workers, workers in precarious jobs, and migrants? How do we make sure that we keep that floor of benefits at $500, and that EI should at least be for 52 weeks? Sickness benefits should be at least for 52 weeks. And we need to make sure that eligibility for employment insurance makes the system, an actual safety net that workers can use. The third issue I want to talk about is paid sick days. So we have to use this federal election to set a standard for paid sick days across the country. And so, we need to have at least federally regulated workers get access to 10 permanent paid sick days. We have the NDP, the Liberals, and the Greens supporting 10 paid sick days. This could set an important standard for then all the provinces to follow to set provincial labor laws. It is mind-blowing to me that here in Ontario, we had to wait till May of this year to get 3 measly temporary paid sick days. We shouldn't have to go begging for this essential public health standard. And so we know that paid sick days are an essential part of recovery, but also just because we're in a pandemic and workers get sick. We're human. The fourth area that I want to talk about is gig workers. So Uber and all of these platform-based app companies want to set up substandard labor rights for workers, which are thousands right now. The Conservatives, especially under Erin O'Toole, want to allow corporations like Uber to opt out of employment insurance and the Canada Pension Plan. And instead of getting EI, so they want to set up a special benefit program. And when you look at the details of this special benefit program, basically it would mean that a worker would hopefully get $103 per month. Whereas under employment insurance, if you make a maximum amount, you can actually get $595 per week. So this means we need to ensure that gig workers have the same rights as regular workers. We need to stop misclassifying workers as self-employed. This is an incredibly dangerous direction. The Conservative government in Ontario already set up a panel to change the rights of platform-based workers, and they're heading into this direction of setting up a special substandard labor rights and working conditions for app-based workers. So very dangerous. Finally, the fifth issue I want to talk about is status for all. We know during the pandemic, we saw newspaper article, story after story of migrant workers in agriculture, care work, meat packing industries, food processing factories, warehouses, fall sick and die during COVID because they didn't have citizenship and they couldn't protect themselves from crappy working conditions and violations of their standards. Workers had no access to COVID emergency benefits at all. The Conservatives, again, federally, plan to make it even easier for employers to hire migrant workers on tied work permits with fewer rights. They also residency is dependent on employer sponsorship. This means even more power for those bad bosses out there who can use the promise of immigration as a carrot and a stick to further exploit migrants. We need to ensure equal rights for migrants, which means full immigration status and an end to arbitrary rules that deny workers their entitlements to employment insurance and other benefits. If there's anything that we've learned during this pandemic, we have to make sure that no one gets left behind and that we don't leave segments of our communities at the mercy of a
Recording
pandemic.
in progress.
Of a pandemic, but of also conditions that leave it really difficult for workers to protect themselves on the job. So 5 issues. We're going to post questions you can ask to your candidates when they come knocking on your door, and we'll post them in the chat for you to take a look at. That's it.
Thank you so much, Dina. Wonderful information, a lot of information. So look out for the pieces that Dina will add. You can send them directly to the host, Dina, and we will make sure to share those. Just a bit of housekeeping. I knew we wouldn't go tech issue free this evening, but our host, our Zoom host got kicked off for some reason. And so our recording stopped midway. So if you see, you heard recording in progress just now, I had to restart that. So I'll say it again for those who weren't on with us earlier. If you do not want to be part of the recording, please do turn your camera off. Otherwise, it will be, if your camera's on, it will be implied consent that you'd like to be part of the recording. Okay? Thank you so much. Dina, so much to work on, right? Thank you for that. We welcome questions at the end of our panel discussion, so feel free to put them in the chat box and we will share as many questions as we can once we finish. And we'll try to make sure that there's time at the end after our presenters speak for you to have some questions. So presenters, I'll give you a little hand like this when we are going over time, okay? So that we can make sure to have some time at the end. Next, we are going to move to a discussion around affordable housing. Salome Amadi is a professor, consultant, researcher, and activist. She is interested in the areas related to equity-seeking groups and the interrelations across communities, justice, and socioeconomics. Currently, she's leading a 3-year federally funded grant studying affordable housing and community-based participatory research in South Etobicoke. It's a partnership between Humber College and LAMP, and we are always happy to work with Humber, especially on important issues like affordable housing. Over the past few months, her research team has been speaking to renters in South Etobicoke about some of their challenges and some of their experiences around affordable housing. So I'd like to welcome Salome. And Salome, I know you'll be sharing your screen, so let's give that a try.
Great, thank you so much. I'll share now. I do have a presentation, thank you.
So Salome, at about 5 minutes, I'll do this and to let you know that you've got maybe a minute or 2 left, okay?
Great, I'll definitely try to stay on track.
Awesome. Thank you.
Can everyone see that?
Yes.
The screen, great. So just a little bit about the project. So I do work at Humber. I teach there. I also teach at Sheridan, and we were lucky enough to apply for this federal grant from NSERC to research housing affordability partnered with LAMP. So it's a 3-year project. We're in our 2nd year. So we're looking to do some more primary data gathering. We know housing is in emergency mode, crisis mode, whatever term, the headlines are making. It's always existed, but now it's heightened, right? And so now we're looking at South Etobicoke to develop a baseline of housing affordability and gather input from community members. As mentioned, we are using community-based participatory research. So we've utilized the expertise of agencies and community residents to help us create the surveys for the questions for our surveys, and for we're moving into interviews and focus groups. So for those impacted by housing affordability and rent, those most marginalized, prone to displacement. So we're looking at those who are homeless and lower income and seniors. I'll share some of the data as well that we've collected to date, a little snapshot. And we're hoping to use that data in tandem with the actions that are already happening in the community. As we know, housing, there are a lot of bylaws and policies in play, and they'll be at council in the upcoming months, a really, really important time, and with the elections as well. So we're hoping to co-create the solutions. It's definitely a long-term we have to sustain this piece to be able to push for social policy change. So community-based participatory research I mentioned, using, including and empowering community folks to be co-researchers in the process. So just a little snapshot. South Etobicoke has changed dramatically. I grew up here. I remember when it was all motels instead of condos. So in Etobicoke specifically, South Etobicoke, 43% rent. I think in the city of Toronto, it's about 46, 47%. But our population here has doubled at the rate of the city. So we have over 25,000 new units being built, for the next 5, 10, 25 years. Christie's is one of them with over 7,100 units. So we're looking to use perhaps inclusionary zoning as a conversation, right? And if we can define what affordable housing is, and affordable housing tends to be conflated with subsidized housing and social housing. And, sometimes we get the remarks, we don't need any more social housing, or some other contentious conversations there too. But it's definitely hit a standstill, and, policymakers and community members know firsthand that the larger impacts of with relation to health and well-being, and how housing needs to be a human right. And it is in major cities around the world, right? So one study shared that you have to really earn $34 an hour to be able to afford the current market rates, right? And the rates keep going up for a 2-bedroom, or work 98 hours per week at minimum wage. So I'll share some of the data, but just a little FYI, this is incomplete. So please don't share it or screenshot it if you need to, because it's just incomplete, right? So the data can definitely change and grow. I'm going to present just 50 surveys. Our goal is to hit 350. We have 184. We have 5 who are not renting, who are in shelters, homeless, or couch surfing. Out of these 50. So we can share a snapshot of that. Average age 50. One neighborhood that we haven't hit up yet is Humber Bay Shores. So that will definitely be interesting as well. We have women and men, and mostly private landlords, and some co-ops, and a few social housing as well. So just a quick little snapshot. The ethnicity that we have, the majority white European, Black African Caribbean, Arab will probably collapse Middle East as well. So that's that. I'm just going to go through this very briefly. The income has been lower out of the 50. So we've been mostly within the communities and the agencies at the local food banks and churches and community centers so far. So the source of income, the majority, part-time at 24%, in Ontario Works. Of course, even full-time employees. I remember one person who shared, they're full-time, but they're not getting full-time hours, right? So they're maybe getting around 30 hours, and they need to access the social services in the community. So there's a lot of kind of hidden pieces there that we'll have to extract and write a fulsome report on. But this is just kind of a high-level look at some of that data. A lot of people that we surveyed out of the 50 have been living in the community for a long time. And one of the main concerns is really about, rent evictions, the price increasing, they know they won't be able to find another similar place at the same price that they're at. And this really highlights, another larger social policy issue when large groups are leaving the city, right, in the thousands. And there's a lot of, policy reports around that too, the economic impacts of that. And so that's important to note as well. And that, the social capital in terms of moving away from your community and families and all the resources and supports that you have locally, right? Another question we asked was, how satisfied are you with your home being affordable? So if we kind of split the two, very satisfied and satisfied, we had about 38% dissatisfied and very dissatisfied. We have about 46. So almost split, but that still highlights, an issue there in relation to our open-ended questions. And I don't have all the questions here to present yet either, but just some of the highlights. How much are you paying? The average was 1,008. The minimum was 119 subsidized. The max, coincidentally, was 2,000 for a 1-bedroom. Obviously, the rent also, when we pull out some of the data and compare some of the patterns in there, it depends on we ask about type of dwelling, dependence, living costs. We didn't ask about living costs, but these are some things to also consider, right? Percentage of income spent on housing, whether they were subsidized versus not. We had about 22 above. They're paying above 1,000, 28 were paying below. And this is just a quick little snapshot of the size of the dwelling, mostly 1 and 2 bedroom.
Just to note, Salome, we've got about a minute or so.
A minute? Okay, great. Sorry. Well, I know
No worries.
it's a lot. But again, the major, open-ended question was really just, times are tough. I'm a single family. I'm trying to keep the roof over my head. Having a place to live is my #1 objective. I won't be able to find another place anywhere in Ontario. We'd like to see the government build more affordable housing units. There's a lot of those comments. This is just some of the 184. And we also give them the opportunity to present some solutions to look at those. Nothing's new, right? We know and have seen these suggestions. So we do need to mobilize and advocate for those. And how do we mobilize, right? So there are a lot of opportunities. The city's quite active and nationally as well, right? We need an evictions moratorium. We need a rent freeze, for the next indefinitely if possible. We do need to bring back rent control on new units because we're seeing double, triple rents on the new units. And then that's why the smaller, apartments are also looking to do the rent evictions and the evictions because they can see that they can double or triple the rent than it was, 5-10 years ago for their tenants. We do need affordable units and affordability defined by the community, right? So you can have, rent geared to income, number of dependents. If they're on OW, some of our more marginalized groups, it should be unique to them. They still don't have enough to cover the other costs of living, as well as a portable housing subsidy, which is, we need to expand that through the city. It's the Canada Ontario Housing Benefit. It's very specific and targeted to marginalized groups, but you do have to qualify for it. So it's definitely not readily available to everybody who needs it. And yeah, inclusionary zoning, multi-tenant housing with the city, it will be, I think, in November, October, in upcoming months. They're going to be looking at that. Progress Toronto, Acorn, a lot of great groups are advocating. There's petitions. So there's a lot of ways to get involved. We're also, will be a quick 30 seconds. Is that okay? Just a plug to join if anyone's interested. We are looking at community benefits agreements with the Toronto Community Benefits Network. So that's a tool we can use to negotiate with developers and councillors to advocate and put a percentage aside for social procurement, whether it's jobs, affordable units, community centers, and rec spaces and green spaces, and visioning that and negotiating that. So we have an ad hoc group that kind of branches off this research project. So you can email Vanessa, and I'm also part of that. La Hague, Lakeshore Area Housing Advocacy and Action Group. We're also looking at some of the different tools like transforming the green P parking spaces if they're available and putting it onto Create TO if possible. And then the research is one part of the advocacy. So and that's, I think, it. Is that 5 minutes?
Thank you, Salome. Thanks very much. I don't think I need to tell anyone on the panel or on this call just how important the affordable housing issue is right now, especially through this pandemic. So thanks so much for sharing all that information with us. And we are all looking forward to the final report findings and ways that we can all help to move toward a better situation in terms of affordable housing. So
Definitely. Thank you.
thank you. So I'll keep us moving and share with you some of the work that we do in identifying communities for the whole community. Kate O'Neill is one such community member who knows firsthand how important affordable housing is and how it helps families to thrive. She's been involved in the housing co-op sector for decades and now volunteers with a group of dedicated residents who've been advocating for the construction of deeply affordable housing units here in South Etobicoke. Kate is a spokesperson for the Lakeshore Affordable Housing Advocacy and Action Group, which has been active for over 4 years now, raising awareness of the housing crisis in the area. Kate is here tonight to just share with you a little bit about her advocacy and to help with a call to action. So Kate, just a moment. Let's unmute Kate. There we go.
There are a
Welcome,
number
Kate.
of steps to get there. Thank you very
Right,
much.
there are. Yes.
Thank you for having me. This is very exciting. As you said, I am a member of the Lakeshore Affordable Housing Action and Advocacy Group, and our mission is to support our neighborhood to locate, protect, and develop safe, secure, affordable housing. Safe, the building safe. It's well taken care of. You don't have leaks in the ceilings. You have a safe home. Secure, meaning that if you pay your rent on time and you follow through with the rules, you have security of tenure and will not be reno-evicted out. And affordable. Salome was just talking about affordable. There are different levels of affordable. At La Hague, we are looking for deeply affordable, which means that that would be 30%, 30 to 35% of your gross income. So a one-bedroom apartment should be around $675 if you were working a full-time minimum wage job, which we all know is a dream right now, but that's why we are an advocacy group. What we have been doing over the last 3.5 years is meeting with all our elected officials, which has been really interesting to see how it works, how we can get housing into all these levels. But my favorite part of these meetings, of the meetings that we've been doing, were the ones that we did in person at LAMP, because I come at housing in one direction. I've worked in co-ops. I believe in co-ops. I think they're the best way to get affordable housing. But I never really knew the level of homelessness, secret, hidden homelessness there is in South Etobicoke. And that really didn't come forward until we started meeting at LAMP and we're discussing how people were living. And it's been exacerbated by COVID because the sofa surfers can no longer surf. People don't want strangers in their house. They don't have enough space in their house to have strangers in their house. And that's really brought the need for affordable housing so far forward. And as I keep repeating, we are an advocacy group. So how are we moving forward as an advocacy group? We're looking at 2 pieces of land down here that are owned by the City of Toronto, which means it's owned by the people of Toronto. One of them is a parking lot between 8th Street and 9th Street, just south of the fire hall, north of the lakeshore, where there's a perfect spot to put in about 100 units in an 8-story building. Can you imagine the change that would happen to our neighborhood if we had 100 units in there? The other one is a little bit different. It's at the very top of 6th Street, where the Lakeshore Christmas Parade houses their floats every year. It's owned by the City of Toronto. It's a lovely piece of land. It needs to be rebuilt. And can you imagine if we put 10 units above there? Just 10. Not every affordable housing build has to be 350 to 2,500 units. And that's the way we're moving. We're moving to where can we slip housing in the lands that we have, that's down here, that's available? Can we buy buildings and add another story to it? Can we move that way? So we are an advocacy group, which then brings in one other problem. We don't own land. So Canadian Mortgage and Housing, who fund a lot of these events or buildings, don't have a little slot to give us money. And so if you want to know what you can do when your candidate or a candidate comes to the door, I want you to ask them how they plan on getting CMHC money down to the grassroots advocacy groups. Person to help move us forward as a job, because we're all volunteers and we need that. We need to have that. We're at that point of it. So going back to affordable housing, and I don't know if you've heard about it, inclusionary zoning. I know that Salome did mention it. Inclusionary zoning means that within a big build, so Christie site, which is 25,000 units, something, or 2,500, I can't remember, it's really huge. I think it's 2,500 units. It's really huge. We would ask that a percentage of those units be put aside for affordable and deeply affordable housing. How it's going to be done, we're not sure yet. It could be that we would have scattered co-ops within those condo towers. But if you think of it at 2,500 units, we'd be looking at about, if we're asking for 30%, we'd be looking at about 750 affordable units in that lot, which would make a huge difference again to everyone down here. And we don't want just small units. We don't want just 1 bedrooms. We want 3 bedrooms where families can thrive. We want 3 bedrooms where there's also an office, so that if the kids have to keep coming back to work, to do school from home, they have space. And that's what we are looking at as an advocacy group, is how can we build more, find more, get more for our neighbors down here. And that's really, I'm going to shorten mine. That's what I'm really looking for. So just a reminder, your group, when you ask a candidate, how are you going to get money down to the grassroots advocacy groups down here? That's my last reminder. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Kate. Thank you. Thank you. So we've focused a bit on affordable housing. As you all know, it's a huge issue. So 5 minutes is never enough, but wonderful pieces that you've shared. And it's important to talk to the candidates that show up at your door. Call their campaign offices and ask the questions. You know, best to be informed as we head into this election, to make sure that your needs are represented and are taken care of. So I'm going to keep us moving along. Sorry, okay, there we go. Just a moment. A reminder that you can add questions into the chat box, and those will come directly to us. And at the end, we will try to get to as many questions as possible. The next topic we are turning to is poverty and food security. If you're paying more than you can afford for housing, you can imagine that you may not have money left over to buy nutritious food for your family. Talia Bronstein is the Vice President of Research and Advocacy at the Daily Bread Food Bank. Staff at Daily Bread have noticed a huge increase in demand for food, even with the CERB in place throughout the pandemic. The Daily Bread Food Bank saw a record-breaking 124,000 food bank visits in a single month this past June. That's almost double compared to an average of 68,000 monthly visits in 2019. Talia is an experienced policy researcher with a passion for social change, and she's been in the public and private and not-for-profit sectors and has a great perspective to share with us. And we enjoy working in collaboration with Daily Bread. And some of you may have seen recently that we did a joint all candidates debate with Daily Bread and MLCN, the Mimico Lakeshore Network. And that was a part of Talia's work, and just always thinking of community. And I'd like to invite her to share her perspective on some of the challenges and what we need to be mindful of moving forward as we try to rebuild better with respect to poverty, food security. Talia, all yours.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me okay?
I can't hear
Oh.
you. Okay. I'll give you a little wave like this in for
Okay.
5 minutes. Okay.
Sounds good. So yeah, thanks for having me tonight. Daily Bread Food Bank, we are located just down the street from LAMP in South Etobicoke. We are a member-based organization representing over 120 agencies and 170 food programs across the city. And we have a dual mission. So to facilitate low barrier access to food, while also advocating for solutions to address the root cause of food insecurity, which in Toronto is very much poverty. So we recognize that, distributing food is not going to solve the underlying issue. What we need are bigger policy changes. And as Kadon mentioned, we've seen a tick in food bank use, and that started almost immediately when the pandemic lockdown was declared in March 2020. And that just really goes to show you, how financially precarious households are, that people don't have savings to tide them over if they have a sudden loss of income, if they lose their job or have a big reduction in hours. And as Dina mentioned, our employment insurance system is not up to the job of protecting workers. So we saw a huge increase in food bank visits. Here in Etobicoke Lakeshore, we saw about a 20% increase, or we have seen in the past little while in visits. And our new Toronto Street Food Bank has never been busier. We're seeing over 4,000 visits every month, and that's significantly higher than before the pandemic. So I think the big question is, why are we seeing this increase? We see the economy is opening up. Unemployment has not gone back to pre-pandemic levels, but it's certainly gotten better since kind of the height of the pandemic. We've had federal income support programs. So why do we still see this increase in food bank visits? Well, I think first it's important to remember that food insecurity is not just a COVID issue. Food bank visits were already on the rise before the pandemic. And what really is driving food bank visits is unaffordable housing, precarious employment, and an insufficient social safety net. So there's not enough income support programs to help people who aren't able to earn enough money through employment. And this pandemic, has hit low income and racialized communities the hardest. And so even though we're seeing sort of indicators of economic prosperity returning, in the big society at large, it's very concentrated in certain communities. We've seen higher income households actually save a lot of money over the pandemic. They're exiting, well, hopefully we'll be exiting the pandemic soon. I guess we're not quite there yet, but people are seeing their bank accounts grow, whereas other communities are really struggling to make ends meet. So we really see this kind of divided pandemic. And so, what Dina was talking about, workers, really resonates. In terms of the clients who are coming to the food bank, about 1 in 5 have somebody in the household who's employed, but the vast majority of these jobs are precarious. They're low wage, they're part-time, contract, temporary roles. 3/4 of these positions don't have any employer provided benefits. And this has a direct impact on food insecurity. So you can imagine if you're not able to earn enough money, you're putting together multiple jobs to make ends meet. Food is not something that you might be able to afford. You're going to put your housing as your top priority to pay your rent. And then food kind of comes as it's seen as kind of a luxury sometimes, which is completely unacceptable. About 2/3 of our clients receive social assistance as their primary income source. And our social assistance system is absolutely inadequate. I can't stress this enough that, a single person receiving Ontario Works receives $733 per month. For Ontario Disability Support Program, it's about $1,200 a month. And that's just not enough to afford basic necessities when you consider the cost of rent in Toronto. And this group was really excluded from any pandemic benefits. There was a very brief top up that was discretionary. You had to go to your caseworker. It was up to them whether you got it or not for $100 to $200. But that was only for a couple months of the pandemic, and it's long gone now. So, the pandemic benefits absolutely prevented some people from having to come to a food bank, but we know that it wasn't enough. There's still groups that are being excluded, that are being left behind, that are being told, you know, from the decision makers that their needs don't matter as much as other people's. So what needs to be done this federal election? The most important takeaway for me is that the solution to this growing food insecurity problem is not actually food. So food banks, we exist because there is a gap in our social safety net. And if we want food insecurity to cease being an issue, if we want to achieve the right to food, then we need good social policies that reduce poverty, prevent poverty, and create resilient, thriving, equitable communities. So I agree with all of the recommendations so far. I would say it's not the time yet to end those federal pandemic benefits, scheduled to end in October. And I would suggest to candidates that until unemployment returns to its pre-COVID levels, we need to continue those benefits because clearly we haven't quite recovered. I would say I agree 100% about fixing the employment insurance system so that people who lose their employment can actually access it, that it's reflective of people's work. It just right now is leaving out so many people. In terms of affordable housing, you know, it takes time to build housing. We absolutely need to be doing it. We need to be investing in it. We need to be maintaining the stock of affordable housing we have. But what we can do immediately is increase access to the Canada Housing Benefit, which is a financial benefit that moves with you to wherever you live. So it's not tied to the actual apartment itself. And that's a quick thing that governments can do today. And then the last piece I'll just say is affordable childcare. This is an absolute issue of economic equality. If we want women in the workforce, if we want all sorts of caregivers in the workforce, if we want to have a fair and equitable society, we need to make sure that childcare is affordable. And we have never been as close to a national childcare program as we are now, at least in the past few years. And it's so critical that we get that over the finish line because a tax credit just is not going to cut it. It's not going to lead to a world where people can actually access affordable childcare. So I will leave it at that and pass it back to you, Kadone.
Great, thanks so much, Talia. You know, all of us are hoping, I think, that especially childcare, so many of these issues are intersecting, and if we're not addressing all of them, it's hard for people to move forward. It's almost one step forward and two steps back in some respects. So hoping that our candidates are listening to people through some of these debates and through some of the information and people reaching out to them. Thank you for that. And our final speaker, last but not least, this evening is Dr. Akwatu Kenti. It's great having you with us. Dr. Kenti is Special Advisor to the City of Toronto's COVID-19 Equity Initiative and Chair of the Black Scientist Task Force on Vaccine Equity. He's an affiliate scientist with the Institute of Mental Health Policy Research at CAMH and an assistant professor at the Dalalana School of Public Health. Dr. Kenti is also the former Assistant Deputy Minister for Ontario's Anti-Racism Directorate and CAMH's Director of Transformative Global Health. So I'd like to welcome you this evening to share some of your insights from some of the seats that you are occupying right now related to COVID and beyond, about how you see, what you see as the things we need to pay attention to as we look at equity and building back better. Welcome, Dr. Kenti. Oh wait, you have to unmute first.
I tried, I've been trying to unmute, but
there you go.
It told me that I couldn't unmute.
We didn't. Welcome.
And you know, I really resent you putting me after Talia because she's so articulate and she spoke so well. I feel at a disadvantage having to come up after her and pull up. You know, it's like the last person, you know, on that track, and she passed the baton to me. But I don't feel adequate. Anyhow,
that's okay. It's all right to you know, go after a brilliant woman. Just means you got to step up your game, Dr. Kenti. Right? Welcome. I'm
all
sure
right.
you've got
Well
lots of
said,
insights
well
to share with
said,
us.
well said. You know,
Welcome.
my wife would appreciate those remarks very much. I'll be sure to convey them after the talk. Anyhow, you know, James Baldwin said, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And you know, there's never been a time to face some of the barriers to transformational change in our society, like during this COVID pandemic. I actually think that it has to be, it's now or never, because post-pandemic, I could actually hear or see the writing on the wall, you know, structural adjustment, we gotta tighten our belts, there's no money in the bank, it's coming. So during the pandemic, we want post-pandemic initiatives in place before it's over, because we know once it's over, we know the script of disaster capitalism around the world, and we know the disaster, so we can anticipate the scripts that's come. Fundamental points I wanted to make this evening, make them quickly because I know it's late, so we can have a discussion. Number one, low income, Black and racialized mental health was problematic before the pandemic. You know, there's a 2018 survey of 300 people, which a representative sample, I would say, found about 35% of them expressing significant distress. That's in 2018, before the pandemic. 1/3 never securing mental health support. Wait times for members of the group was twice that of their fellow white Ontarians, 16 months versus 7 months. Problematic. Living in disadvantaged neighborhoods has involved far fewer mental health programs and services, even though they've been warranted by higher prevalence of mental illness, substance abuse disorders, or what have you, but that's been the pattern. So prior to the COVID, it wasn't good. In fact, some people think it was a crisis. Some of my colleagues use the term crisis. COVID-19 has been, the health harms of COVID-19 has been inequitably borne by low-income Black and racialized Ontarians, Torontonians, and Canadians. You know, there's so many ways to illustrate the point. Ontario lost 355,000 jobs last year. 765,000 workers worked far fewer hours. And those hardest hit were the accommodation and food services industry, where some of our lowest income workers work. Women and young people were especially hard hit. The employment rate for young people has gone up to 22%. And it doesn't bode well for future prospects, especially for Black and racialized youth, especially for those who are even disadvantaged by criminalization and criminalized records. Approximately 40% of low-income Black and racialized youth reported COVID-related financial insecurity versus 22% of their white peers. That's huge. And when does it end? Because, you know, these chronic, what's chronic becomes acute, and it's not looking very good. So when people talk about building back better, building back mental health back better, but mental health wasn't good to begin with. So how do we build a different kind of mental health system? If you will say, what's your number one? My number one ask would be for the CERB to transition to universal basic income. The best mental health is social determinant support, especially housing. And other previous speakers addressed that. Otherwise, Black, racialized, and low-income people are going to be bearing an ever greater share of income and employment inequity in this country going forward. It's terrible now. How much worse can it get? I would also like to see transitional wraparound supports to vulnerable neighborhoods and individuals continue for an extended period post-pandemic, because otherwise I think we're going to have an explosion of PTSD and child and youth mental health problems, for which we actually don't have interventions in place now. We don't have preventions in place now. Our schools don't function in a primary care capacity, which they could, because the earliest definition of primary care wasn't just about family health teams, community health centers, but about schools. Schools should function as primary healthcare institutions, especially when we can anticipate mental health problems and prevalence way beyond what they are now post-pandemic. PTSD usually shows up after the disaster, not during the disaster. So we could anticipate a lot of problems like that. But we've put in place some supports that work, that are both precious and priceless. The mental health checks that the City of Toronto has been doing, and through the 11 neighborhood organizations, have been incredibly welcomed by the people at the receiving end. And I would hate to see them end. The food support, the transportation support, these actually are mental health supports in other forms, social determinants form. I would like to see mental health literacy and capacity building across all workplaces. You know, our essential workers have been bigged up. You know, they say they big them up in the papers, heroes, but they haven't given them 10 sick days. At the very least they could get is workplace mental health programs to protect their mental health and well-being, because we can expect there's been a lot of mood and anxiety and distress just from the fact that they can't work from home, like their fellow Ontarians, Canadians, and Torontonians. And everybody wants to work from home during a pandemic. Nobody wants to be in a congregate setting exposed to COVID. And I would like to see significant resources, and that's fourth and final, devoted to public stigma reduction. Mental health stigma is a huge problem for all groups, but especially so for low-income groups, racialized groups, culturally diverse groups, who actually can't recognize many mental health symptoms, aren't aware of what the symptoms mean, but also suffer from a lot of stigma related to perceptions of morality, moral responsibility for some of these presentations. And I think stigma is a crucial issue, because I think that if we don't curtail stigma, especially stigma towards the unvaccinated, we're going to have more problems than we can manage, because the unvaccinated are entitled to be unvaccinated, even though I, like everybody else, wants everybody to be vaccinated. And I'm spending the last 6 months trying to promote vaccinations. But at the same time, I fear that we're getting into a situation where we've sort of let the genie out of the bottle around superiority, moral superiority for being vaccinated versus you're not being vaccinated. And I will leave it there. You know, I said I gave you James Baldwin at the beginning. I'll give you Martin Luther King at the end. He said there comes a time when silence and inaction is betrayal. And I think that silence and inaction on these key issues would be a betrayal during the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kenty. Mental health, you're absolutely right about the resources available for that. Prior to the pandemic, we've all been asking for more. We know there's a need for more. And as we go through this pandemic and people are experiencing such trauma for various reasons, it's going to be ever more important for our leaders to support processes and provide resources to support mental health in our workplaces, in our homes, in our schools. Everywhere is going to be really important for us if we're going to move forward and rebuild better than we are now. So I thank you for your contributions there. I'd just like to thank all of our panelists for your contributions. And I'm going to, with our last 10 minutes, just check through the chat to see if we have any questions that I will throw at you. So audience, if you do have any questions, please do put them in the chat box, and I will do my best to get us through as many as possible. I do have one comment that was related to Kate's comments about different areas in the community that may be opportunities for deeply affordable housing. Alan cites that there's the Ontario government land west of Judson and Islington that could also be looked at. Thank you for that comment, Alan. And Les also has a question. The city is passing a new citywide regulatory framework for multi-tenant homes to legalize, license, and enforce standards to help support tenants and maintain affordability of rental housing. Will this focus on multi-tenant housing help ease the affordability and shortage issues in the city? And I will send that to Kate or Salome. Kate, you first.
I love the multi-tenant. And if people don't know what that is, it is a traditional rooming house, which means that in a traditional rooming house, you have your room and your own bathroom, or a room and your own kitchen, but not all three, because that becomes an apartment. I think they're brilliant. And it used to be one of the best ways of housing all levels of income. Traditionally, a young man would move out to a boarding house when he's leaving the family home. They went out of favor, but they are the best and the fastest way to get people housed. So in letting people make a rooming house in their, using their larger home, because it's multi-tenant, is perfect. And what they have been saying is that there's going to be a group, they're going to get together at all levels within the housing bylaws and fire codes and all of that. So it is moving forward, and I embrace it wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Kate. I'm going to switch to a second question now for Dina. Dina, Nicole asks, what are your thoughts about implementing a basic income?
Yeah, I was wondering if I'd get asked that question. So to be honest, this is a conversation that we've had. So the Workers Action Centre, we're a workers centre. So workers get involved in our organisation. So we have about 400 members, and they're active in a lot of the conversations that we have around workers' rights, and do a lot of the campaigning. So when the issue of the universal, and it's not really going to be a universal basic income because there actually isn't the money for it, but it would be probably a means tested basic income. And so I think what our members said, and I think that this is really quite critical, is that unless we need some criteria before it gets implemented. So until we have affordable housing, until we have affordable childcare, only then can we consider this program, because basically what you'd be doing is you'd be taking your $2,000 and you'd just be giving it to your landlord. And that's what the money would go for. It would be funding landlords, and it would not be actually doing what we want, which is to actually have an income that people can survive on. The basic income is also being, and I think we really have to make sure that we're clear on who is promoting this as well. Many corporations are pushing the basic income because they say, you know what? We don't need to deal with part-time work. We don't need to deal with precarious employment. We don't need to deal with temp jobs. We should implement a basic income so we can continue to pay poverty wages, and we can continue to provide terrible working conditions, and the taxpayers will just do the rest. And so I think that what we have to do is we have to say, if we want, and so don't get me wrong, like if there's ever been someone who has been fighting for social assistance and for ODSP and for every other benefit since Mike Harris cut the crap out of it in 1995, it's been me. I was against Ontario Works. But the thing is that if we're not careful, these are the same governments that would be implementing the basic income through a merit-based system, through a needs-based system. And we know how that works with social assistance. So I think we've got to be really super careful what we're asking for. And I would say that until we have affordable housing implemented, and that people are not going to be just taking the $2,000 and just giving it to their landlord, our membership is opposed to it, and we are opposed to it because we just think it would just be funding the landlords, and it wouldn't actually be doing what everybody wants it to do, which is to provide a decent living for those of us who can't work. And so I think it's really fundamental that we set a real strict criteria upon which it's implemented. Otherwise, we could be changing a horrible system for another horrible system, and really actually not support what we're actually trying to do, which I think for every one of us, it's about how do we support those who can't work for many reasons.
Thanks so much, Gina. And another perspective, thank you for the question, Nicole, and very insightful. So I do have a question for Salome, but Salome, I know you wanted to comment on the multi-tenant housing. And I also have a question here about someone asking, what do you think about what do you think would be the most effective policy to put in place so that more people can get homes faster?
To get homes faster, if there could be clarify
affordable housing faster.
Okay. Affordable housing and renting. So just a quick note on multi-tenants. So even though rooming houses can really help formalize it and kind of legalize it through licensing and proper safeties and procedures, right, especially during COVID. So I think to some extent it's a bit of a stopgap solution in my humble opinion. I think it's definitely one approach, right? It's a solution for some and not for all. Some of the feedback that I've personally gotten from some of the survey respondents were very much, I'm living in a multi-tenant home, whether it was legal or not, we didn't ask, but having to share facilities, especially during COVID, is a challenge, right? That kind of underscores, a person's right to dignity and living in a safe space and that kind of thing. So there are challenges with that. I think we can't overlook those. And for students, especially students, I hear oftentimes newcomers and international students quite exploited in multi-tenant housing as well. So those things might fall under their radar, even if something is, legalized and formalized. So we just want to be mindful that, and this is one part of the solution. For sure, we have a lot of great tools, and this can definitely help alleviate some of the short term, because it is more affordable, right? And we also received that there were folks who said, I would not be able to live anywhere else otherwise, right? This multi-tenant housing works. However, I have roommates that we don't get along, or the COVID situation, right? So there are some challenges that we can definitely look at. What would be the most effective? I don't know if I'm smart enough to answer that. I think there are a lot of tools, right? I mean, I'm definitely for radical change. So if we can overhaul everything and really allow for folks to have rent geared to income at all levels and tailored to those most in need and based on their dependence. But for the moment, what are the policies at play and how can we have those conversations to change those, right? So Ford remove the rent cap on new units, and we're having over 25,000 units built in South Etobicoke. So that's a disservice to housing as a human right. So that's one provincial piece, increasing the funding through the Canadian Ontario, that partnership, the municipal and provincial partnership housing benefit. Right now, I think, it's specific populations, but maybe we can expand that. So there are different tools, as I mentioned, community benefit agreements. Essentially, we do need folks to mobilize, right? So if there's no pushback, the developers have already felt entitled to date. So if there's no pushback, they will continue as is, because that's the status quo, right? So we really have to voice and act on it and not settle for the way things have been, or we can't change policy, or where do we go? There are opportunities in just choosing one to get involved in. So we've been fortunate to have the research and some of the research assistants are here too. So thank you, Vanessa, Daniel, Jonathan, and Jasmine, and our advisory group helping, and who are residents for helping support that. The community benefits ad hoc, some of you might be here as well. So really important to just mobilize and use the tools we have. So multi-tenant housing is going to be at council. Do we need to do deputations? Do we need to talk to our counselor? Even more so, right? And really asking those questions at those candidate debates. So
thank you, Salome. Thank you. So we've got two more questions, one for Dr. Kenty and one for Talia. So Dr. Kenty, how can we protect our children's mental health, and what policies do you think should be put in place to help children at school?
Yeah, protect your own mental health, because children respond to the well-being or the sense of well-being and protectiveness of the adults. And if the parents are stressed and distressed, unable to cope, that will make things even worse for the child. I mean, like, that's the 1 minute answer. Children need to be engaged. They need to be learning. They need to have activities. And it's very difficult when you're in one of these complexes to very limited space to keep them engaged, keep them learning. So, take care of yourself as an adult, as the parent, so that the child, you can protect the child. But if you yourself unable to cope with the various socioeconomic challenges, as about 40% of the population is saying that they're not, that will affect children.
Mhm. Thank you, Dr. Kenty. And I know we're at 9 o'clock, but I do have a question here for Talia that I'd like to just ask before we wrap up. So Talia, question, food security is a huge issue and so is food waste. Do you think Canada can put into place policies that can manage this food waste and possibly redirect it to those in need?
There we go. Just trying to unmute myself. I'll keep it really brief. I know it's an absolutely important issue. It's an issue about sustainability and climate change and, how we run food systems. I don't think if we have programs in place that address food waste, I don't think that's a food security solution. I think that there's environmental benefits, but I think if we want to actually really address the root cause of food insecurity, we need to ensure people have the dignity to acquire the food that they want, that they need, that it's not accessed, through charity. I think if we want to achieve the right to food, people need to have access to affordable, culturally appropriate, nutritious, adequate food on their own terms, right? So I think, diverting food waste is a good initiative that we should absolutely be doing, but I wouldn't consider it as a solution to food insecurity.
Thank you, Talia. Great points, especially in terms of, families and people who are in need, having access to not just food, not just leftovers from elsewhere or things that we don't want to waste, but actually having access to nutritious food, because we do see the impact of some of the lifestyle choices that result in people choosing to eat poor diets because they can't afford to buy nutritious meals or to access nutritious meals. So that's a key part. Having access to food is one piece. Having access to nutritious food is something different altogether. Thank you for that. I would like to thank each and every one of our panelists this evening. Wonderful insights. Thank you for sharing with us. The issues that you spoke about this evening are all intersecting, and for us to really make a dent and support wellness, well-being, and overall health, it's going to be important for us to tackle all of these issues. We may not be able to solve them all today, but it's a step in the right direction that we're bringing awareness about all of these issues and sharing with our community. And so I'd like to next thank the community for being here with us. We were at, I think, over 100 people joining us during this meeting, and about 80 of you are still here with us. So a round of applause to you. Thanks for staying the course with us and for joining us for our 44th annual general meeting this year. We are going to sign off now, but please get involved, get informed. The federal election is coming up in a few days. Please exercise your voice and your power and your strength and vote. Go out there and find out about the candidates in your local area and make sure that you are holding them to account, that you are making sure that your needs are represented. And wherever you need help with doing any of that, please reach out to us at LAMP. We thank our partners who this past year during COVID, collaboration has been the key to supporting our communities. And I thank each and every one of our organizational partners and individual community members who have partnered with us to make sure that this community continues to be well served. And we will continue to do that and hope to see you at our 45th annual general meeting next year. Please take good care of yourself and stay safe. Have a great evening, everyone. Okay. I know we have a few people signing off still, but I just wanted to say,